Hey everybody, this is E. Marcel Pertu. Welcome to another edition of the Verbal Submission Podcast. Hope all of you are doing well out there in the world. We're broadcasting on February 4th, 2021. We have a lot to go over on our show today. We're finally doing a podcast specifically on professional wrestling and a little bit of mixed martial arts. Finally getting into it, very excited about it. On today's broadcast, we're going to recap the Royal Rumble, everything that happened there. We will discuss New Japan and all of the antics and things going on there as they prepare for New Beginning. I'll touch on AEW wrestling, and that will delve into an analysis of the working relationship between professional wrestling organizations in a 2021 world. And we may wrap up with some mixed martial arts content on the conclusion of the show. As always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, thesportsenquirer.net, your premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. You can head to the site and see all of our interviews and other things we're doing on the site, as well as the Sports Inquirer show, which is our overarching show on all things in the world of sports. We have analysis on the Super Bowl. We've discussed the NBA and things like that. So if you want to hear more about things outside of professional wrestling and mixed martial arts, make sure you check out the Sports Inquirer show. And you go to the website to do that. You can also go to our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook pages. Search Sports Inquirer, that's all one word, and you will find our pages on there. And that's a great way to keep up with what we are doing. And then finally, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, and really wherever you listen to your podcast or audio content. Search for us, Sports Inquirer, and you will find us on there. And listen to us, subscribe, like, enjoy, and all that stuff helps us. Whatever you just listen, listening's cool. Giving us a like is help. Following us, all those things are very beneficial for us. And hopefully, you listen to the show and it's beneficial to your ears. Yeah, so just do all that stuff, and that is a great way to keep up with all the stuff we have going on. I'll start with the Royal Rumble, and that'll delve, I think, and transition well into the other professional wrestling organizations because the Royal Rumbles, I still consider it a big four in WWE. Well, when I was coming up, it was WWF. That shows my age. And I started following wrestling and really in earnest, I would say around 1990 or 91. I was born in 1981, and I was about 8, 9 years old, and that's when I understood the concept of professional wrestling. And really before that, in a way too, because I was a Hulkamaniac like all the other little kids, but also arguably my favorite all-time wrestler is Randy Savage, and that feud with him and Hulk with the Mega Powers and Elizabeth and all that stuff. That was hook, line, and sinker into it for me for professional wrestling. So I've been following for a very long time. But during that time was also the launch of the Royal Rumble around that period in the late 80s. And I consider it one of the big four, the other ones being WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. The Survivor Series also launched around that time as well. Obviously, you had WrestleMania, that was the big one that was in the March, April, depending on what the calendar stated, and you had these other fillers. You want to have something at the beginning of the year, kind of the lead into it. Royal Rumble was that. Summertime is a big empty slot, and SummerSlam did that. And then obviously the Survivor Series slash Starcade, if you want to go back to the NWA days, NWA slash WCW, that was a launch during Thanksgiving because that was during the holiday season. And I remember we used to be on Thanksgiving night, so that was a very interesting time. But Royal Rumble's always been that pay per view that leads into WrestleMania. It's a new calendar year, it's where you start seeing the storylines develop for the launch of the. I think WrestleMania kind of look at it as conclusion of the wrestling year or the beginning, but it's a lead up into the big event, and the storylines always start with obviously who wins the rumbles, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but also who eliminates who, what feuds you can kind of see emerging from that. And so that's really like what the Royal Rumble. It's a lot of people's favorite Rumble, or my favorite pay per view. I still call it pay per views. I know it's on the network, and pay per views are kind of non-existent anymore, even though they still kind of exist. But it's been my favorite one because it involves all the talent. You can really root for someone to get eliminated early, or root for someone to make a run towards a championship opportunity or a chance for the battle for the championship. So you also can see friends turn against each other or unlikely alliances during it. So all that stuff is always fun to get into. If you're into gambling, it's always fun to pick a number and pick a guy that you think was going to win it. And I didn't pick the correct winner in either one. I was very close with one of them as far as the Rumble goes. The other one wasn't as close, but I didn't mind the winner at all. But that's why I think the Royal Rumble's always been a fun pay-per-view for people to check out. Well, along with the Royal Rumble, you have title matches and people fighting for championships. And usually, it's for the heavyweight or the main championships, and that's what you usually see before the Rumble. And that's how this card started with Drew McIntyre facing Goldberg for the WWE Championship. Very odd to have Goldberg come back in this way. I know he has a big contract with WWE and he's a name guy, popular guy. We saw what he did with Lesnar a few years ago, winning the championship, and that was a solid moment. People were very excited about it. But now I think we're just past that time for him to be a major contender. And it kind of went from Drew kind of going about his business, not having a contender. It's like, all right, we'll just call Goldberg, out of nowhere. So he just shows up kind of with the Legends night they had a few weeks ago. And I was like, all right, he's going to face McIntyre for the championship. And it's pretty much what you expected it to be. Quick match. McIntyre obviously retained the championship. A lot of power moves. Goldberg can't really do too much anymore in the ring, and it's understandable. The man is of an advanced age in professional wrestling terms, or lifespan. So he's not going to be doing 10 spears and jackhammers and doing backflips off the top rope. That really wasn't his game anyway. But now, as his advanced age, you're definitely not going to see that. So Drew, I think, did a solid job. Just quick match, a lot of power moves. I think the time was less than 3 minutes of actual match time, and that's fine. I think Goldberg's better usage would have been as an entrant in the Rumble, and McIntyre could have faced someone else. And I think right now, I guess maybe Sheamus is going to be the person that they want to have him face in the time being, because we don't know who Edge is chosen yet. Well, Edge won the Royal Rumble, and obviously, if you win the Rumble, you get to choose who you're going to face. We don't know if Edge is going to face Drew, or he's going to face Roman Reigns. We'll see what happens there. But I mean, Drew retaining the title was a smart move. I think he brings some validity to the championship, and I think he was misused and mismanaged so much in his time in WWE during his first run. I think the second run has been solid. I mean, the three-man band was kind of started with Jinder and in that regard, with a three-man band. So that was a start for him to get back into it, into the main roster. And I think since he's come back and has really developed his character, I mean, the man is physically very big and intimidating. He can cut a solid promo, and he really got cut off at a bad time with the pandemic, because I think after Royal Rumble last year and him, getting the title, the crowd was really into it. And you saw the momentum, and then pandemic, no crowds, and that's really hurt his run. And then also we lost to Randy Orton a few months ago, the title. We got it back, which is good. But I think that Drew keeping the title through this time is a good thing. And we'll see what happens there. Sasha Banks defeated Carmella to retain the WWE Women's title. Another quick match. Sasha's been on a roll the past few months. So, her and Bayley had a nice run as a kind of frenemies over in the later part of last year. They've gone their separate ways, but I think Sasha's really stepped her game up and has become a solid women's champion. Carmella kind of lucked into this championship opportunity, or just opportunity to win the belt, but she doesn't bring much to the table. Another quick match, and we can move on from there. Roman Reigns defeated Kevin Owens in a last man standing match. Roman has done a very solid job as a heel with Paul Heyman or his advocate, and bringing that toughness and edge to his character that many have been wanting to see, including myself, for several years. And he's been on a roll right now. Him and Kevin Owens, I thought was a good feud, because Owens is one of those guys where physically he doesn't match up with Roman, but his attitude makes up for it, and he's going to step up to face Roman and not be intimidated by it. The last man standing match itself, I mean, we saw the big dive, with Owens. The botched handcuff spot. I think the problem with that was two things. One, if you're going to do the handcuffs, and handcuffs have been in wrestling for 1,000 years, ever since handcuffs were in wrestling, that they have been used. But I was listening to Jim Cornette's podcast, which I highly recommend that you do. It's an entertaining listen. And he broke down the whole usage of handcuffs and how it should be done. And he brought up 2 points that I agreed with. Well, he brought one major point and then another one that I thought of. My first major point is that, and this is where I agree with Cornette, if you're going to do the handcuffs, you got to have the keyhole facing the direction of the competitor so that whoever tries to get him out of it, in this case it was Paul Heyman, doesn't have to blindly go and you'll do the wraparound and find the keyhole and insert it, the key into it to open up the handcuffs. And handcuffs they're usually universal key with the type of handcuffs, and because you want to be able to different officers, if you're in a different county, a different state, you want to be able to use the same key to open up the handcuffs in case you need to use them for whatever reasons. And so there's not like I mean, every handcuffs are different, I guess, in a way, but for the most part, you're going to have a common set of hand keys for handcuffs. And Heyman, I don't know what was going on there. I guess the keys were not matching the initial set of keys. They were not working with what he was trying to do. And it took they had one guy was counting, did the ref bump, the referee did the ref bump to buy him more time to open it up. And then the second referee came, he started counting, he got to about 4 or 5. And last man standing is usually a 10 count or 20 count. So it wasn't like 1, 2, 3. But Owens was, I mean, Reigns, and technically he was not, he had his feet on the ground and he was kind of kneeling. So he was standing. So the count was, it was kind of negated in that regard. But they really messed up with that. And then to the location of it, they had Reigns on the ground or sitting on the ground when he was handcuffed. If you're going to do the handcuffs, you got to have Reigns at least in a midway position or even standing up. And that makes it easier for him to maneuver and also for the person getting him out of the handcuffs, in this case Heyman. That's my second major point. The placement of it on that rigging very low did not make sense as far as what they were trying to do. But I mean, it was about 2, 3 minutes of very awkward timing with Heyman trying to work that key to get the handcuffs off. But they got him off eventually, and ultimately, if Reigns got out of the handcuffs, put Owens kind of in a sleeper submission hold. Owens gets passed out, and that was the end of the match. So it's kind of anticlimactic. You did this whole chain handcuff to the rigging, and him getting out of there and very stressful and panicking, and then Reigns just got out of it and submits him. I thought that was a little anticlimactic, a little odd. We'll see what the follow up is on that. But I guess what I in Edge, very interesting to see who Edge faces. We'll get to that Royal Rumble and recap it, and then we'll talk about who we may face. But Roman really has taken his a solid place among champions and really put himself in a very good position, in that regard. So we'll see what happens there. Bianca Belair won the Women's Royal Rumble, and I thought my pick going into it was going to be either, I thought it'd be Belair. My favorite, or most as far as my booking, was going to be Rhea Ripley. She's not on NXT anymore. We knew she was moving up to the main roster. This was going to be a great debut for her. We knew she'd be in the Rumble, and I thought that would be a very good opportunity. Second was Bianca. Bianca on SmackDown has been making her presence felt in a big way. You've seen her get a lot more airtime, and it's been very interesting to see what's going on there. So the Rumble itself started with Bayley and Naomi, and Belair was number 3, and she lasted 56 minutes in the Royal Rumble. And we saw some different people get some moments in there. A lot of NXT, and you saw that unlike the men, they had a lot of open spots in the Women's Rumble. We saw Shotzi Blackheart, Tori Storm, Santana Garrett, excuse me. Rhea's technically, I guess, is NXT still. We saw a lot of NXT talent in Dakota Kai, even Ember Moon, people who are usually reserved for NXT in the Rumble, and that's not unusual. We've been seeing that over the past few years of what's been going on. But you knew that it would probably be a combination of Rhea, Charlotte, along those lines, maybe a Bailey, for some intrigue. I'm glad Charlotte did not win it because we've seen her in this position before. She is one of those people who does not need the Rumble to win to get a title shot or to be in the main picture. I think the Rumble is a place for, at least in this particular situation with the women, was a chance for a Ripley to have a moment, or a chance for a Lacey Evans, or even Nikki Cross, even though she was eliminated by Carmella, which is not the biggest highlight of her career, I'm sure. But for certain people like that, to get a chance to be in the Rumble and to be elevated. So obviously, the winner was Belair. She was able to eliminate Ripley. That's a big moment for her. And Rhea and Bianca teamed up to eliminate Charlotte Flair. So that those were good things to see there overall. But I think that with Bianca winning the Rumble, I mean she has many options. I think that her and Sasha would be an intriguing grouping. They kind of play a similar character as far as like trying to be the boss or be the top woman. And they're all trying to be top women, but just their attitudes and approach, they're kind of similar. I mean, they're different women, but that could be kind of that could be a clash. Maybe sometimes you have two wrestlers with the same type personality that can not work. Now, Sasha kind of carries herself in a, we don't know what she is. She has some heelish elements and some face elements. Bianca came off, Belair came off as a baby face in a major way, especially that promo she cut after it. So I think that she can really get that positive energy behind her and be a major person there. I think Rhea Ripley. Obviously you can go back to Charlotte last year. They may have had the best match at WrestleMania, Ripley and Charlotte Flair. So that's always they could go back to that well, and I don't think people will be too mad with that at all. But yeah, I thought that the women's rumble was okay. I think the right people were in it towards the end. I don't need to see Well, we love Victoria, but time has passed, and Jillian Hall definitely did not need to see her again. Her and Alicia Fox, they like to bring back the legends, and you want to put Mickey James in that kind of category. I mean, she's a little bit more active than those other ones, but I don't really care too much to see a lot of the older wrestlers in there, in that spot. I'm glad Lana didn't win. I know some people were saying that she had some buzz because she keeps losing so much and getting beaten up every week. Maybe this will be time for her to be the surprise winner. I don't think you can have a WrestleMania main event or one of your marquee matches for the women's title with Lana in there. But that's I think overall I've been a or not Mark. I've been a supporter of Nikki Cross for many years now, especially when she was with Sanctum or Sanity, which that group that was led by Eric Young. I thought they dropped the ball in a big way. Not having that group take off. I love factions that are aggressive and heelish, and then they throw a woman in there like a Nikki Cross who will do anything and jump off of anything that you throw at her. I thought that would have been a really awesome grouping. She's been kind of in the lost right now. She was doing some things, with some other characters, but it just was not with Alexa Bliss. She was like best, friends with her, and now she's kind of in the middle of purgatory per se. I'm glad Alexa Bliss did not win. I think that her whole thing, and I think Bliss is a good performer and a solid wrestler. She's very good on the mic. I think we've seen her with her Moment of Bliss kind of interview segments and everything like that. But her thing with the Fiend and with Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton, that whole angle is not doing much for me. And her changing personalities and clothes in the middle of matches, that's a little too much Gaga for my taste. So I think that her not winning was a good thing as well. But as I said, overall, I think when you have Bianca winning the Rumble and eliminating Rhea Ripley, that's not a bad thing. I think those two are the future of the division, and we will see what happens where Bianca goes from there. Finally, the men's Royal Rumble. Edge won it. First entrant was in the ring for more than an hour. He was the first. He's a number one. I'm I don't like when they go to the older guys, and that's because I mentioned all the women, and not like seeing the older people in the Rumble and even winning it. But Edge has been involved quite a bit in the past year or so. He's been wrestling, so he's not a complete out of the blue old guy getting in there. But I thought that ultimately him winning was a good thing. Some highlights from the Rumble: him and Randy Orton, they started it off. They were 1-2. Orton injured his knee, quote unquote, about a little bit into the match. It was led to the back, and we saw him working with the doctors. And you knew that when he hurt his knee and he wasn't thrown over the top rope, he was going to come back and eventually participate in the Rumble. And that's exactly what we saw in there. I think that Carlito making an appearance was funny. Carlito looked good, and I saw that they had a match on Raw. I've not watched Raw yet. The night after, I mean, I saw the very beginning promo with Sheamus and with Drew and Edge and all that stuff. But I didn't see Carlito's match. But seeing Carlito in there was all right. I said it's cool, and that's kind of what he says. But he looked good physically. We'll see if he stays on the roster for a long time. I was disappointed that Big E got eliminated by Onus, almost, whatever you call him, AJ Styles' bodyguard. I don't think that should have counted as an elimination. And I know there's technically it's no DQ because it's a Royal Rumble and you kind of do what you want to do. But I think he should be eliminated by, this not only was almost not in the Rumble. I get mad when you see a guy get eliminated from the Rumble. And he's on the floor, and then he goes back into the ring and throws someone else over the top after he's been eliminated. That should not count as elimination for that second person. And the referees are right there, and they're not enforcing that rule. That makes me I get mad at that because I know it's a no DQ, but you should be if you're eliminated from the Rumble over the top rope, both feet on the ground, by someone who is a participant or still alive in the match. So I did not like, and then Big E, I thought he should have. I mean, he was in there for 30 minutes, so he wasn't in there for like 2 minutes, like Miz was. Miz was in there for a minute, and then Damian Priest just threw him over the top rope. But I think that you need to have more rules and regulations in that regard, especially when it comes to a guy like Big E, who is a very good. Now, Rey Mysterio getting that treatment. I mean, I like Rey, but it's him when he's not a threat to win a Rumble. But I thought Big E deserved a little bit better than that to be eliminated by a guy who's not even in the Rumble. So I did not like seeing that at all. I mean, see, I thought Priest had a solid debut. Him and Bobby Lashley kind of bucked up to each other, and Lashley eliminated Priest. I think that's a match that I would like to see in the future. And even Lashley, the man's a freak. As a matter of fact, I'm going to look up his age right now. I remember Bobby from 15 years ago looking like he does. He's got to be in his mid 40s. Let's see. He's 44. The man looks like he's 20. I don't know. The man takes incredible care of himself. Him in the Hurt Business, I think it's a good thing because MVP can kind of act like a voice for him. Even though I've seen him cut promos, especially even when he was at TNA, he's got a good promo. It's not awful, but I don't understand when he came back to WWE a few years ago. My thought was, out of all the people that they have with Brock Lesnar, obviously he's the big man that everyone is trying to chase, even him not being there. He's still a guy that kind of looms over a lot of things. And you had all these other wrestlers that were trying to, who could beat Brock Lesnar? Obviously, you looked at Roman and you saw his size, physicality. But I thought that they would find, because if you look at Brock and a and in his career, is very and Bobby, they have similar careers. Both wrestled at the amateur level, and Brock, they both have MMA backgrounds. Bobby did it in the military when he was a serviceman, and he has that wrestling background. Obviously, Brock has an MMA career with the UFC. So does Bobby Lashley. He has done MMA in several organizations, including Bellator, which is a very solid organization. So I thought that there would be the guy that would be maybe not beat Brock, but will be that guy that can stand toe to toe and physically look like this guy can beat Brock up pretty good. They've never crossed paths in that way. I don't know if they ever will. But I look at Lashley and it was like, man, and it was the same thing with Drew. I was like, this guy, and I'm talking to my uncle one time about this, about guys, I can make half these guys world champions in 6 months with a proper program. And I look at it now. Big E could do it. Priest, it's not Priest time yet, so I'll say a year. So give Priest about a year. Daniel Bryan, I think it could be a champion caliber guy. And and some guys have tasted it. AJ's been a champ, Daniel Bryan, and they've been champions, themselves. But I said I look at Big E and I look at Lashley, but more Lashley as guys that why are they not world champions or at least being in that contention for a major spot? So him being in the match only 4 minutes and being eliminated by four guys, and he was eliminated by Big E, Christian, Daniel Bryan, and Matt Riddle. That's not the fate that Lashley should be having as far as making a major run. And and just so many other guys. It was cool to see Hurricane Helms. Christian, it was you expected to see if you saw Edge and Orton, Christian's lurking somewhere, and Christian looked good. Now, the thing about Christian, he's dealt with concussions and head injuries, so the Rumble's a good spot for him because he doesn't have to take too many hits in that regard. But I thought he lasted pretty well, 18 minutes. We saw Seth Rollins make his comeback. Cesaro's another guy, by the way, and he was number 28, and he was eliminated by Braun Strowman in 4 minutes. Cesaro's another guy we've been talking about for years that he could be a world champion as well. I want to throw that out there. But Seth made his comeback, I guess, from paternity leave. Obviously, him and Becky Lynch are new parents. So we came back. I was disappointed he didn't come back to the Burn It Down Seth Rollins. He came back as the Monday Night Messiah, even though technically he's on SmackDown, so he's the Friday Night Messiah. I mean, Church, I guess, could be on Friday. Church really could have been on Monday too, but anyway, I thought that would have been a good chance for him to come back with the Burn It Down. Maybe they're saving that for when crowds are going to be back in arenas, which Lord willing will be within the next few months. For all of our sakes. So maybe they're saving it for that. But I thought that he should have been came back to that character, but it's good to see him back and on an active roster. Braun Strowman was number 30. We already knew that beforehand. He lasted 7 minutes. He eliminated a few guys. Edge eliminated him. I think that's good. Braun is kind of like in that Charlotte Flair book where he doesn't necessarily need the Rumble to be a championship contender. So he can work for a few months even after WrestleMania, and you can build him up to a SummerSlam or even another pay per view as a number one contender pretty easily. So he's another guy that really didn't need the Rumble. But I said Edge was able to win. We saw Randy Orton come back. He tried to hit the RKO. Edge was able to kind of counter that, and he is now in the number one contender spot, and we'll see what happens there. I thought the Rumble was okay overall. It's a Rumbles are tricky in where that you have 30 people in there at various points, and you kind of want all of them to have like their 30 seconds to shine or a minute, and it's very hard to pull that off, in a major way. I mean, you have some funny moves like Helms can't go into the ring, and Biggie and Bobby Lashley got rid of it in 30 seconds. So that's a little bit of comedy there, in that regard. I think the right people won overall if you're looking at booking for the future. So with Bianca winning for the women, that gives you some opportunities. Edge is a viable contender for either one of the championships, and so we'll probably find out in the next day or two who he's going to challenge for SmackDown or Raw. I can make cases for both with Drew, and then I think you can make a case for him and Roman Reigns. And I think both those matches could be viable. And go ahead, as long as it's not Randy Orton. We've seen Edge and Randy too much. I mean, both those guys are all timers, Hall of Famers, legends, but they've been fighting too much together for the past year or two. So I think we should move on from that. So those are my thoughts on the World Rumble, and we're going to transition to New Japan and what's been going on in that world. Big major return for New Japan. Jay White, our boy, is back. We was talking on our last show how me personally speaking, he's my favorite wrestler in New Japan, just for everything he brings to the table. And he made his return. You knew he wasn't going to go away after he lost the double title match to Ibushi at a Wrestle Kingdom, and then he had that tag match at the day after a New Year's Dash and was pinned by Ishii. You knew he wasn't going to be over and be done for him, but he took some time off, and now he is back. We saw him make cameo appearance, attack Ishii, and it's definitely set up some unique things. I'm glad that you have him kind of reclaiming the Bullet Club leadership role. Him and God are looking like the guys that are carrying that mantle. And for a longtime wrestling fan, I liked the Bullet Club, obviously with Prince Devitt, who you know now is Finn Balor, and it started off in that regard. I think AJ Styles had a nice run as Bullet Club leader. When it got to Omega, it was a little got a little off, but I was still invested. When it got to like him and the Young Bucks and kind of the Elite, I thought that Bullet Club got sidetracked from what it's supposed to be. In essence, Bullet Club is supposed to be, and I know there's some Japanese wrestlers in it now, particularly Evil and Kenta, but it's supposed to be the foreign wrestlers really taking control of the non-Japanese wrestlers taking control of New Japan and doing it in a dominant way and beating up everyone in their way in a heelish way. So I think with Jay in that regard, especially with the Bullet Club and with God, those guys, I think it's a step in the right direction for what Bullet Club is supposed to be. Now they're feuding with the Dangerous Techers. That's where you're kind of looking at Tai Chi, Zack Saber Jr. with God. It's weird because you kind of have two heel factions facing each other with Suzuki-san and with the Techers, and then God obviously they're heels as well. But I think that Saber and Tai Chi are leaning more towards the good side of things because GOD's really elevated their heelish antics, particularly taking away the Iron Fingers, which is a hilarious thing with him and Tai Chi. It's silly, I know. Wrestling doesn't have to always be intimidation and every best man wins and all serious all the time. If you have some kind of mystical silliness with it, I can stomach it in several ways. So I like what I see with that, and they're going to face off with the IWGP tag titles, and they're also going to, and White and God, Guerillas of Destiny, are now going to go after the six-man tag titles, which gets Goto and Yoshihashi involved in it, as well as Ishii. And I think that's going to be a fun element. I don't think they're necessarily going to win that, but I like that the Bullet Club is going for all the gold, which is an element of what they should be doing. So I don't mind that at all. I think the light heavyweight title has been very intriguing to build up the show versus Hiromu Takahashi. We'll call him Hiromu from now on because the Takahashi and Tanahashi get confused. But I think that show has really elevated his game. Obviously, his tag team partner's out the knee injury, so Show has had to go solo for the past 9 months, and he's put himself in a major position for the light heavyweight title. We've said before, I think Hiromu is the rock star of New Japan right now. He's their top face, their biggest guy, even though he's a light heavyweight. And him facing Show has brought out some intrigue on both sides. I think Show's coming off as the young guy, the young babyface going for his first individual title. Hiromu is a face as well, but his arrogance has made it a very interesting storyline. I don't like Ibushi cutting into the middle of their interactions. I think it should be stick to just Show and Hiromu going for that light heavyweight title. But I think that's going to be a really good match. I think Hiromu's going to retain it, but Show has really put himself in a position for a fun solo run. And I'm assuming Yo's going to come back at some point, and they could be back to Roppongi 3K. But I think that when you take advantage of the situations, or you have to work with what you have, and Show as a solo artist has been doing a lot of good things. So I'm very interested to see in New Beginnings that matchup. Obviously, Kota Ibushi and Sonata, they've been building up for the heavyweight title. I don't see Kota losing this match at all. Sonata, as we mentioned before, I think he's a good wrestler. The Cold Skull is a good description for him because the man has, I don't want to say no personality, but I don't really find him that intriguing with just his presence. And I thought him and Evil had a nice little gothic thing going when they were a tag team. But since Evil's moved on to Bullet Club, Sonata is kind of a little bit in limbo. I would like to see a little bit more personality from him. It We already had Evil turn on Los Increíbles de Japón, So I don't know if they want to do another turn of a guy leaving them with Sonata, but I think him maybe emerging from the shadow of Naito would be of intrigue. Maybe later on in the year, or when New Japan Cup comes up later on in the calendar year. But as I said, I don't think Ibushi is going to lose that title to Sonata, not right now. And with the Ibushi, I think he's very popular in Japan. He's a face guy there, and people like him. He doesn't really do it too much for me personally, but he's more intriguing to me than Sonata. I don't know if I like him trying to merge the titles together. I will say this, the good part about the IC title, Intercontinental Championship, and the Heavyweight Championship being tied together is that it's elevated the never open weight title, which Tanahashi currently has. He was able to beat the Dragon a few nights ago to win that belt. So I think the never open weight title will, it's kind of like the BMF, the bad, mother effort belt of New Japan. Anytime, anywhere, no weight classes, no distinction as far as who you are or where you're from. Anyone could fight for it. So it's elevated that belt, and that's good. But I think if the Intercontinental title would have been good for some guys, maybe a Naito, he could work his way, or a Hanma, they could be fighting for an Intercontinental belt. Even in Osaka, they're Okada, Evil, them facing off for an IC title would make their matches more interesting as far as what those storylines are doing, instead of just doing these single matches. So that's why I think an Intercontinental title being separated would be a good thing. So there's another belt to fight for. But holding the double belts is a major distinction. I think the U.S. title, and we'll get to Kenta. I know we saw him last night at AEW. He's going to fight Moxley. I think that's where maybe that belt can elevate into that as that Intercontinental title slot. But we'll see what happens with Kota's got to worry about beating Sonata, and I think when he beats him, maybe we'll get some more clarity on what they're going to do with the two belts, because it is a little much to have one man carrying two belts like he does, and just kind of log jamming uh, a belt, either one that could be contended for by different people. And as I mentioned, I touched on the other feuds. We're seeing Hanma versus Naito. I think this is good for Naito. He's not in the title picture right now, but him and Hanma, him beating him would be is a good for a few months they can feud, and this is just a good time killing for Naito to put himself right back in the title picture, and I'm sure he'll be a major presence with the New Japan Cup coming up very very soon. Okada and Evil, obviously you have the elements of Okada and and Evil, both those guys, former heavyweight champions. They kind of need a time kill. So that's been interesting. Master Wada, who we've not been high on recently on the show, him facing Bushi, I think is a good thing. It gives Wado some experience facing a veteran like Bushi. Both those light heavyweights can be. You can argue that whoever wins that match maybe finds himself in a championship title picture, because after a show, after we see that happen. If Hiromu beats Show, I think there's an opening for some light heavyweights to be the next contender, and it might be a little early for Wado, but Bushi, and I know they're part of the same faction, they're part of Los Ingobernables de Japón, but I think that could be a matchup that'll be very interesting to see. So that's the next time. By the time we do our next show, we'll have some major titles decided with the New Beginning, and we look forward to recapping that when that takes place. All right, we'll wrap up the show with AEW and everything that's been going on there. I saw the end of last night. We saw Kenta attack I call him Dean Ambrose, John Moxley. We saw him attack him on AEW, and it's a very intriguing deal we have going on. Obviously, John Moxley is the IWGP U.S. Heavyweight Champion with New Japan. We've known this. Problem is, with the pandemic and everything that's been going on, he has been unable to defend the title. They end up holding a tournament who could be the number one contender for the championship. Kenta wins that on U.S. soil. Obviously, Kenta goes back to Japan for his obligations with New Japan there, and he has the briefcase. He keeps calling out Moxley, keeps calling him out. However, you now and just keep saying, Moxley, where are you? Why are you fighting me? We all know why this isn't taking place. And this is where real life comes into play. If you go to Japan, you have a 14-day quarantine just to get there. So you or I, if we want to fly to Japan and do whatever, we have to be quarantined for 14 days. And that means being in a hotel room or wherever your lodging is before we can even step out into the public. Obviously, Moxley can't do that. Go fly to Japan, wait 2 weeks just to make an appearance. Fortunately, and I think that's where they have a working relationship with New Japan and AEW. And obviously, Moxley, when he's in the United States, is an AEW wrestler, former champion there. But luckily, they've been doing these NJPW strong deals in California. Kenta happened to be over here, and we saw Moxley attack him, and they exchanged words and everything like that. I assume Kenta stayed in the United States for the past few weeks, and we saw him. It was on live television last night, so that was February 3rd. He was able to attack Moxley at the very end of the show. Interestingly enough, wearing his Bullet Club T-shirt. So we have a lot of moving parts here going on. And if you've been watching AEW for the past few weeks, we've seen the Good Brothers, Gallows and Anderson, and they're the TNA Tag Team Champions. They've been on AEW doing work, and we've seen some AEW talent. They're going to start going to TNA. So right now, AEW is kind of the congruent between TNA with the Good Brothers and Don Callis and all that going on, and now with AEW. And obviously, the AEW storylines, half those guys have been in Japan at some point. Specifically, Kenny Omega, who was the world champion in New Japan, years ago. And obviously, the Young Bucks, they were champions as well in New Japan. What do I think of all this? That's what you want to hear, or the analysis of it. First, I think it's good that there's a working relationship between AEW, TNA, and now New Japan. I know WWE has their own process of doing things, and they very much have their people stuck, or not stuck, but under contract. You wrestle WWE, that's all you do. I don't think these other companies, New Japan, at least as coming into the United States, where they're trying to have a footprint in the United States, you can't just isolate yourself. If you can have a working relationship and exchange talent, it's a very good thing. I think it would have happened earlier, quite honestly, if the pandemic was not taking place. But as I mentioned, with the travel and restrictions and everything going on, it's taken time to develop. The good part is now that if Kenta can stay in the United States, which he probably is for the rest of the month, we now have our long awaited match between Moxley and Kenta later on this month at a New Beginning event in the United States. That's still supposed to take place later in February. We don't know where yet specifically, but it's going to happen. But this is good. I think each AEW can use talent. They need talent, an influx of it. You already see that when the Good Brothers, who are TNA World Tag Team Champions, are main eventing, and that's who you're using as your main event talent, that shows that you have a lack of talent. And AEW is still a young company. They're 2 years old now. So that's okay. That's not bad at all. I think it's been leaning too much towards TNA because you have their guys coming into your organization and beating up your guys. The payback has to be coming very, very soon because it makes AEW talent look inferior. And then furthermore, you have Kenta. Now, it was a sneak attack. It wasn't a one-on-one, granted. But you have Kenta, another guy from outside of your organization, a New Japan guy, come in and beat up your main guy in John Moxley. So, I mean, and Moxley's going to get I think he's going to get his comeback. And it has to be on AEW TV, though. It can't be just on New Japan. Kenta needs to make an appearance again on Dynamite, and Moxley needs to get over on him in some way because that's what your organization is looking weak, having these outsiders coming in and beating people up. So I think that, but those things are nuanced that need to be worked out over the next few weeks, and they can be. But the fact that they are all working together, I think is good for the business. I think it's also going to be good because, Lord willing, when the travel bans are a little bit looser, we've seen guys like Gabriel Kidd and Sushi and some of the other young lions over in Japan. they need to do their excursions very soon. AEW would be a very good place for them to do excursions. That means that they are New Japan wrestlers. They're young guys that have been training under in their dojo. They go to another organization and receive training and seasoning before they come back to New Japan and become top talents. We've seen it most recently with Master Wado, Great Okan, and Jay White, and you just go down the line. All these guys do this. Even Okada. I remember Okada when he was in TNA Wrestling about 7, 8 years ago, maybe 10 years now. These guys come over. Naito obviously did that in Mexico. Came back with his character, Los Incables de Japón. He started his own faction. We've seen what he's launched from there. So all these guys need to do this at some point. And I think that TNA or AEW is a very good place for that. And you also can get some of the LA Dojo guys that are currently in the United States. We have Clark Connors. We've seen Carl Fredericks. Those guys can go to AEW and be major players as well. I'm not saying they can win world titles, but they can be guys that can go there, get some seasoning, get some reps outside of New Japan Strong, which is like a weekly show. They can go to AEW, and furthermore, they're very talented, they're well trained, so the exchanges are good. Some of those guys going over to Japan, goodness, if you can get the good, and I know that we have the fractions or factions of Bullet Club itself. But can you imagine the Good Brothers, Anderson and Gallows, going to Japan to reclaim Bullet Club from God? I mean, come on. I'm not a booker. I'm not a wrestling writer, but I can write. I mean, I got the ideas in my head right now. I can put together a plan for the next 6 8 months. That would be awesome. That for everybody involved. But if these companies are willing to work together, and it's very tough to do that. We saw it 2 years ago with during WrestleMania weekend at Madison Square Garden with Ring of Honor and New Japan working together. I thought that was done very well. I enjoyed seeing that. So that was a good example of it. So if you could do a super show or two per year at an MSG, at Staples Center in LA, because New Japan does have a strong presence in California, maybe the spot where WrestleMania is, they can piggyback off of that. I think those are really good potential opportunities for all these companies to work together and build on what they're trying to do. So seeing Kenta last night attack Moxley, very good move by the entities, whether it's Tony Khan, owner president of AEW, whether New Japan in their front office were able to make some moves there. That's a good thing. So I was very excited to see what happens there. All right, that concludes today's show. Thanks for listening to our broadcast. As always, head to thesportsinquirer.net for all of our content and our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and search us on there. And then finally, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and wherever you listen to your audio entities. Until next time, good fight, good night, be safe.